Let's start with the headline: Pittsburgh and Baltimore, with the Steelers finding a way to pull that one out, led by the defense. I think Pete has listed here. We want to show a little bit of a full screen here. Lamar Jackson, his 2 starts against the Pittsburgh Steelers, and neither one good. Yesterday, not good at all. 4 turnovers, couple of touchdowns, couple of interceptions. A lot of things we want to get to here with our headline deep dive, but what's your first thought when it comes to Lamar Jackson, the Ravens offense, and how they lost to the Steelers yesterday?
Well, the Ravens offense lost the game yesterday. That would be my first thought. And again, they did a lot of good things. There's a lot to be positive about, definitely. I mean, really, the Ravens controlled the tempo of the game for the most part of the day and really weren't stopped a whole lot on the offensive side of the ball. That was Pittsburgh's first real crack at, whoa, Lamar, Baltimore Ravens offense hitting on all cylinders. I know they got to play them last year in week 4, but that was still Baltimore trying to get in their flow of their offense. So, hey, he made some plays, and Pittsburgh certainly had to adjust to life and playing this Baltimore Ravens offense. But this was Lamar Jackson's first real test against this front 7, healthy, flying around, Minkah Fitzpatrick at safety, all of those issues. And it's one of the few defenses in football, Paulie, that I would say, no, even for a guy like Lamar Jackson, you got to reel it in and be a little bit more careful against this group than other groups. There's just too many big, freakish athletes in the front 7 who can make plays, cause disruption, do that. And if you just break it down like this, pick 6 to start the game, it's cover 3. I mean, there's nothing special about it. Spillane does a great job of kind of just reading Lamar Jackson's eyes. Lamar is looking to his left and just flips to the right, Paul, and kind of just throws it blind, like looking left, flips to the right, just assuming he's going to be open, and Spillane does a good job in jumping it. Then 7-7, Baltimore's controlling the game. They drive down the field. It's a 2nd and 9. Lamar Jackson, they're on the 9-yard line. Nobody's open. He sits in the pocket too long. This is Pittsburgh. This is the Steelers. They're coming. You can't sit there and pat the ball 4 times and then try to figure out what you're going to do at the last second and try to throw the ball. Bud Dupree, strip sack fumble. So that's, Ravens' fault. Then you talk about the first play of the second half, which was basic spider 3 wide banana to the weak side there, Paul. And
explain that one a little bit.
So, yeah, it's a weak side play action pass. He's going to have 42 Ricard in the flat as his fullback. And then he's got his guy Mark Andrews running a corner route. Andrews does not get enough depth on his route. And 56 Hightower, who's a rookie for Pittsburgh, outside linebacker, he is covering the fullback, but because Andrews is not deep, he can almost cover both of them by himself. And Lamar knows he's supposed to cover the fullback, and he tries to just loft it over his head. And, of course, the kid makes the interception, sets up the short field for the Steelers, and kind of jump-started their offense and got them going from that point. But I didn't mean to ramble for so long, but to me, the big part of the day was the turnovers, definitely. And Lamar Jackson kind of serving the game up a little bit on a silver platter for Pittsburgh to take it and take advantage of.
Right. Yeah. Right. And as you can imagine, Chris, a lot of the homies with a lot of questions here via social want to get to as many of these as we can. Let's start with @NotJPowell. He asks, did Lamar throw poorly, or did it look like the coverages were confusing him?
No, I didn't feel like he threw it poorly. You're always going to get confused against Pittsburgh to a degree. Yeah, you are. I mean, they do a lot of exotic, crazy things that, even me who's sitting here studying football my whole life, I sometimes go, I'm not sure what coverage this is or what rules they're doing here. But for the most part of the day, he made a lot of really good intermediate 8 and 10-yard throws. And then, of course, when they needed him at his best, at the end of the game to make some clutch throws, to go down and take a lead when they're down 21-17, he did that too. So I have no problem with the overall physical throwing from Lamar Jackson or anything like that. I think he had control of the ball. It's just, hey, the first interception, he just didn't see the defender. The second interception, he sees the defender. He throws the semi-appropriate ball, but the degree of difficulty is too tough. I mean, he really has to get it up and get it down and throw it in the perfect spot. And that, to me, was just a misjudge of the circumstances. Hey, it's the first play of the first half. You're up 17-7. Your defense is dominating. Steelers offense cannot do jack diddly shit. And you let them off the hook and kind of got them going right there. And that to me is, the big story of the day.
And it's amazing, Chris. It's one of those games that you watch, and between what your eyes are telling you, then you look at the stats. They have more than twice as many total yards. They outrushed them by 200 yards. You look at that and you're like, okay, the only way that a team is going to lose that game is if the quarterback comes up with as many turnovers to actually just give the game away. And that's what happened. So even though you can point to more good plays than bad, the only way they lose that game is if he turns the ball over 3 or 4 times, and you turn it over 4 times.
Yeah, no, I agree, Paul. That to me, that was the difference between Big Ben, Big Ben, Big Ben, Big Ben. He was like, whoa, this ain't my first rodeo. I've played in Ravens, Steelers games before. I'm going to let the game come to me. I'm not going to force anything or get us out of the game before it even starts. Let me kind of feel it out. How's this going? When do I need to step on the pedal? When do I need to step on the brake? And that was the difference, because Lamar in Baltimore, now, of course, they're used to stepping on the pedal and nobody ever stopping them. They're used to steamrolling teams. And they certainly had their moments yesterday. Hey, that Steelers defense, they got run on. There's no doubt about it. I mean, early on in the game, it was on the edge, and then they kind of overcompensated and tried to stop edge runs, and then it went right up the middle. And the Ravens had their way really with either aspect of the run game there, which led to a big day. So there's still a lot of positives from Baltimore and the offensive side of the ball. I think still the big question remains on this, though, Paul. With the Baltimore Ravens offense, as talented as Lamar Jackson is, as powerful as they are in the run game, again, in obvious pass situations, I'm still not sold that the Ravens pass offense, Lamar Jackson, can carry the squad when they need to. And we'll see where that goes. And that's not all on Lamar Jackson either. It's not the greatest pass offense in the history of football as far as the way it's orchestrated, scheme, and things like that as well. So I'm not blaming it all on Lamar. But that, I think, is still a real question going forward. And, there's things I like, but it's just things I'm not sold on in that aspect.
Of course, there's a lot of things you like. There's a lot of things that you love, and a whole lot more things that you like that you don't like. But I think that this game can't just live in a bubble, Chris. You and I both know the Ravens are so good.
Right.
They've clearly separated from most of the teams in the AFC, just like they did last year. And Lamar is separated from most of the quarterbacks. I think you feel very good about having him in your top 5.
Definitely.
But if you go back to their last 7 or 8 games and say, okay, what are the 3 most important games there? Tennessee game in the playoffs, Kansas City game this year, Pittsburgh game yesterday. In those 3 games, what's the similar theme? The offense and Lamar much lesser than they were in the other games where they steamrolled people. So we've talked about this game a little bit. Yep. Let's put it with those other 2 games, and Tennessee to end last year.
You're right. Okay, go ahead. I want to make one more point on the Ravens offense before we flip over. That's all I'm saying. But go ahead with what you were saying.
Well, this is on the Ravens offense, but it's not just looking at this one game, Chris. It's comparing it's looking at their 3 biggest games of last year. And he has not played up to his standard. The offense hasn't played up to their standards. What was similar yesterday to the Kansas City game earlier, to the Tennessee game that ended last year, that wasn't very good for Baltimore?
I would say, not being, to your point, not just being able to consistently bully those defenses, right, to where, we could just take it for granted every drive. We're just going to smash it up the middle on the edge and make these huge plays. Listen, they had their way with the run game, certainly. But I think the other thing, too, that I would take into aspect with those is, pass rush, people around Lamar Jackson, and making him throw the ball into tighter windows. Those would be 3 things I would look at to go, they all had a common thing in those 3 football games. They all did it a different way. The Titans were more of a let's play coverage last year. Our pass rush isn't that great. We'll flood zones and have people back there to make them throw into tight windows that way and not let them scramble. That's kind of the way they took it. Kansas City's been more of, no, we're going to man you up a little bit And there's going to be no free zones or play action pass, wide open people over the middle. And then same thing a little bit of yesterday. Chris Jones, Frank Clark are capable of creating chaos and being around Lamar, to now when he wants to buy time or extend a play, he can't quite create the magic he normally can. And I think that's more along like what Pittsburgh did yesterday. You know, they can get those pass rushers around him to where he's not going to just make magic happen every time he drops back to pass or buy enough time to go, all right, everybody was covered, but now I've escaped the pocket. And, hey, receivers, you got 4 more seconds to get open or more open now. And, no, he couldn't do that because Dupree, Watt, everybody was running him down, and he didn't have that luxury. So that was a big thing. And here's the last thing I'll say about this, Paulie. Here's, the Chiefs called their bluff, right? I think we did the podcast right after that game a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
Spags called their bluff and basically was like, you're not running on me. Screw you. Look at these great pass looks. Let's see if you can beat me that way. And they didn't. And when it got big time, clutch time yesterday, Paul, and it was the last drive of the game, the Pittsburgh Steelers played not a 3-4 defense. They played a 3-5 defense the whole last drive. 3-5, Paul. 3-5. The last 2 drives of the game, I'm specifically talking about the drive that ended up with the quarterback draw up the middle that he ends up fumbling on the 4th down, not the throw it into the end zone drive, excuse me, just to say that. But they played a 3-5. 3 down linemen, 5 linebackers, and it didn't matter what personnel set the Ravens were in, Paul. Even when it was 3 wide receivers and 1 tight end, Pittsburgh played 3 defensive linemen and 5 linebackers and only 3 DBs.
And by doing so, they're basically saying, we're stopping your run. I want to see if you can pass. We're not even hiding it. We're going to stop the run. You go ahead and try and throw.
No doubt about it. That's exactly what they were doing. They were going, it's the biggest drive of the game. And the one thing we know you guys can do is run the ball. We're not sure you can go down and drive the ball throwing it on us and get a touchdown that way. And, hey, at the end of the day, they still ran the ball for the most part. The Baltimore didn't even trust Lamar to throw the ball all the way with some of these looks. So to me, it was one of the last things I wrote in my notes. I just wrote, kind of says it all right there. I don't know if his own team trusts him totally in those situations just to let it go. And obviously, we've seen some of the top cream of the crop type defenses who don't believe it, or they got to see it to believe it first, and they are going to err on stopping the run in those big moments.
I think you recognizing that and pointing it out, that it was happening in the last couple of drives. It wasn't something they ran up the flagpole in the second quarter and say, let's see if this works and see what happens. When they needed to stop the most, that's what they did. Isn't that an NFL defense saying what some people are wondering right now? Is like, if you have to pass, can you really do it?
I think so, yes. And I'm not sure the Ravens, just the way they called that last drive, I'm not so sure they believe they can either. I mean, really. Most offensive.
What do you mean the way they called it? Just because they were still leaning so heavily on the run?
They still went and run. I mean, here we go. Let me just read out the plays on that last drive. We're talking about the one where they get on the 4th and 3 quarterback draw.
Right.
That drive. But it's 3-5 defense the whole drive, and it's J.K. Dobbins run for 7. Gus Edwards run for 4. J.K. Dobbins run for 9. Dobbins for 5. Edwards for 20. Dobbins for 15. Lamar Jackson up the middle for 3. Dobbins for 2. Lamar Jackson up the middle for 2. And then, of course, comes the quarterback draw. So they played 3 DBs in the game, 5 linebackers, and Baltimore still said, no, we're going to run it. Now, listen, they could be also saying this is what we do and we're going to do it no matter what. Or are they saying, I don't know if I totally trust him to throw the ball down the field and win the game this way, so let's run it. I mean, you could take that either way. I don't know. But to me, that's something concerning once again because it's just, again, we're putting them in the Super Bowl level. And with Super Bowl teams, right, I'm just not sure they're going to get away with that.
They put themselves there. I mean, it sounds to me like, Chris, like my summary from watching so far and from listening to you, I mean, I think 85% of the teams would sign up for what they have. But right now, it sounds like a team that's good enough to go 13-3, but once they get to the playoffs, unless a giant step is taken with this offense led by Lamar Jackson, it's going to be disappointment again.
I think that's very fair. I got to see it to believe it. And I hope they err on continuing to throw. That's what they have to do. In some of these games that they got coming up where they know, hey, we're the better football team, we're going to beat them, blah, blah, blah. Maybe you sacrifice from not winning 35-10, and the game has to be 28-17. But you get more reps and more throwing the football and expand your offense that way to grow it. Just like we've talked with the Kansas City Chiefs. Not going to be able to throw bombs every game against every defense. When you can't do that, what's your offense going to be? We've seen them get better at the run game and get better at the short passing game. Well, it's like vice versa with Baltimore. You're not going to be able to just smash mouth every good defense in the AFC or in the NFL. At some point, somebody's going to have the personnel to stop that. Can you beat the pass game? Can you grow it and be, schematically creative enough to stress people? And that'll be something to watch for.
And with your question about being schematically creative, and I do want to get on to Roethlisberger and the Steelers offense a little bit, but Cody McKenzie asks, do the Ravens formations limit their offense? That's his question. And I want to ask, if so, how?
Yeah, I don't think they do. Listen, there's certain formations when they get in there and they get into big, heavy personnel sets where, yes, obviously they're going to try to run the ball. It's two tight ends and, the fullback Ricard, who's basically a defensive tackle playing fullback. So, yes, that's going to limit their passing options there, but they don't care on those certain, personnel sets. They want to run the ball and just impose their physical will on you when they do that. But I think normally outside of that, after that, no, I don't think the personnel sets or the formations or anything like that are hindering the overall pass game. I don't. I think they can be a little more creative in ideas in the pass game. And then, of course, they just have some things they need to polish up and get better at.
Okay, flipping it now to the Steelers side of the ball. Let's start with this question from Ezra Giesling. The question is, are the Steelers the most complete team in the NFL? And let's focus on that from the offensive side.
Yes, right. Well, they're in that conversation. They are. There's some work on the offense. Can I say they can just definitely run it down somebody's throat if they have to? No, they cannot. And as you saw yesterday, what the Ravens did a really good job of is they took away what I call the Steelers' BS. And it's not BS, but it's part of their offense and how they really move the ball and screw over most defenses. But the screens, the short passes, all of those type of things that they use as like a de facto run game, because that's really what they do. They can't run the ball consistently good, so they're good at wide receiver screens and short passes to kind of make up for that. Baltimore, that wasn't happening against them. It's the reason I picked the Ravens to win the game, because they're going to play up in your face, aggressive. They're not going to give you those short throws or those wide receiver screens. And so that's still a work in progress for the Pittsburgh offense altogether. I think they're one of the more complete teams in football. I'm not sure I'm ready to say they're the most complete team quite yet, to our buddy there's question. But
I was kind of hoping you would go down that road, because even though there's a lot to feel good about, creating 4 turnovers, you get the win against your major division rival. Your quarterback plays well enough to win. They got dominated by the Baltimore defense for most of the game, didn't they?
Yes, they got dominated. They couldn't do anything in the first half.
What was the biggest problem?
Well, really, I mean, Baltimore was capable. Yannick Ngakoue was a good trade. Let's just start off right there, okay? Yannick Ngakoue popped just about as much as anybody on the field yesterday on the defensive side of the ball. Ravens and Steelers, I mean that. He makes a difference for this team. But, the Steelers and how the Ravens can match up and play man-to-man that way. And they gave them a tough time. The Steelers really had a hard time separating from the Ravens DVs. And then when you talk about the front four of Baltimore, it's hard to run on that group, whether it's a nickel defense or whether in their base defense. Forget about it. I mean, they got so much versatility. They can get big, and now with Yannick Ngakoue, they have a true speed rusher. But more than not, Paul, there's nothing specific I could sit here and tell you the Ravens were doing this. They played it pretty vanilla. It was man-to-man. It was two-man. It was a little cover 3 here and there. But more than not, it was man-to-man in your face, and they had a lot of success with it. And the Steelers weren't capable of really separating much throughout the day.
As strong as that defense is in Pittsburgh, Chris, I don't think that they can count on, and they're not counting on creating 4 turnovers every game Do you think Pittsburgh can keep winning, keep doing what they're doing while Ben Roethlisberger, and this is a pattern, is playing at an efficient level and playing really well, but his yards per completion often is less than 10 yards per completion? I mean, how much longer can they keep winning this way?
Well, I think they can. They can. Now, listen, I don't think there's only a few defenses in football that are going to really give them problems like the Ravens can. And the one thing with Big Ben, the one thing you got to give him credit for, again, yesterday, most times in games like that, the opposing quarterback against the Ravens starts to panic, and they throw stupid throws, and they start to force the issue, and all of a sudden it's a 17-7 game, and you look up and you go, we're losing 31-7, because that quarterback just couldn't help it. I got to do something. I got to make a play. Big Ben's patience was very important in the game. One of the other things that will go unnoticed about the football game that was really a big part of it was Pittsburgh took their shots down the field. And they didn't necessarily end up in completions, but what they did end up with a lot of big pass interference calls. And that was a big part of the football game. I know you'll look at the stat sheet and go, yeah, the Steelers only had 221 yards of total offense. Well, also, the Ravens had 110 yards of penalties, and most of those were on the defense. So it's almost an extra 100 yards that the offense got that, yes, isn't going to go on their personal stat sheet, but it was at least for them being aggressive and going, hey, you're playing Chase Claypool man-to-man. We're going to throw it down the field. I don't care. We'll see what happens, but we're not going to let you play like this all day long. And I think that was a little bit of an underrated value to the game altogether. But in the second half, the one thing they just figured out a little bit was they found ways at least to get the short passing game going, dink and dunk, an occasional shot, pass interference, or maybe we got a few yards on that pass play. And that really was all they needed on the offensive side of the ball because of some of the things their defense did.
Is it a fair, criticism to point out that they're not getting a lot of yards per completion, or is it a compliment to their identity? They're saying, this is who we are. This is what our quarterback can do.
Yeah, I think that's more of what it is. I think it's more of this is their identity this year. It's going to be hard to create big pass plays for them all the time because they don't have a run game. They can't get underneath the center and just run it at you. So as you know, when the best way to make big pass plays is play action pass. And when you have that threat of the run game, they're in the shotgun almost the whole game. It's a spread offense. James Conner's a spread runner that way. And again, let's just not forget, this might be the best corner duo in football they had to play yesterday. And it's a very damn good defense that's very well coached. And this is where I give Pittsburgh credit. When they're two drives, they're two legit touchdown drives, right? Not the ones that, the one off the short field turnover and all that. They just started playing one-on-one ball. That's really what they did. They just said, wait, it's one-on-one out here. Big Ben can throw strikes. This guy will get open just enough. 5 yards. 7 yards. 8 yards. And they just started to break it. They started to say, let's stop worrying about scheme and all this. They're playing man on the outside. Let's just go one-on-one. Big Ben, you throw it in there. And that really was about all there was to the game plan and what got them going on a few drives. And then, of course, they caught him in zone a few times where he hit a few other short passes. And that was that. I can't sit here and tell you there was anything special Pittsburgh did to expose Baltimore or anything like that. It was just a good all-around team win. Big Ben played smart. The offense made plays when they needed to. He was really accurate with the football and then made some of his best throws when they really needed it, at the end of the game.
He's been accurate all season. He's up close to 70%, I believe. I think touchdown interceptions close to 4-1. We pointed out the 3 picks he threw last week. You can kind of explain all of those and make sense of them. As for Baltimore's defense, I always like to kind of spin it forward when a team does well against one of the better offenses.
Right.
You pointed out they're very good at corner. They're very good up front. I know that. So other teams can't copy the personnel. But can other teams look at that film where they, for the most part, got the better of the Steelers' offense and say, we're going to apply that to our game plan against them?
Yeah, it'll be hard. It will be hard. You'd have to have a special personnel set because I'll say this. With Pittsburgh right now, when they put Claypool, Deontay Johnson, and Juju Smith-Schuster on the field, that's going to be a hard 3 guys for any defense to match up with. And that's where I just go, Baltimore's, they're special that way. And now with Yannick Ngakoue, too, they don't have to worry about blitzing as much. And I think it's just really going to make their defense even that much more dangerous and maybe better for when they finally have to play the Patrick Mahomes and deal with that once again. Listen, they threw the one play I wanted to talk about too is, he threw the little short, shallow cross to Eric Ebron, right? That
Yep.
the second touchdown to make it 17-14. Hey, the young guy, Patrick Queen, he messed up there. He covered the wrong guy. He had a blown assignment there that left him wide open for the touchdown. But other than that, their defense played really well. And they put them in tough spots and put the pressure on them. And the defense played well enough to win the game. It's just the offense put them in a tough spot. And Pittsburgh took advantage of that and ended up winning the game.
All right, before we wrap up and put a bow and set aside that really the marquee matchup of the weekend, final thoughts there on Steelers or Ravens, either one of those teams?
I still think that these are two of the best teams of football, and I'm not backing down from the Ravens, still is one of the best teams in the sport. The Ravens are, I really think in a lot of ways, they're going to come away from this game, and yeah, they'll be pissed off, but they're going to go, wait, we screwed this up. We won a lot of areas of this football game, and I think it's going to do a lot of good for Lamar Jackson. Just the fact that he got to feel their speed and their aggression and their physicality to where when they play him on Thanksgiving night on NBC, or if they even got to play him in the playoffs, I think he'll know of that fine line of when to take a chance, when not to, and, not mess with these freaks of nature that the Steelers got up front.
If you had to pick an AFC North champion right now, would you go Steelers or Ravens?
I would go Steelers, especially now with the 2-game lead. I do. I think it's going to be tough for Baltimore to overcome it. But I think Baltimore is going to make it close nonetheless. I do. I think they'll have a say here to where we get into December and we're going to go, whoa, it's one game, or Baltimore won that second matchup and Pittsburgh's only got a 1-game lead and they're going to kind of have to hang on down the stretch.
You think Baltimore is one of the best 3 teams in the AFC?
Oh, I don't think there's any doubt about that in my mind. Yes, I do.
So that would be Pittsburgh, Kansas City, and Baltimore
yep.
is next?
Yep, I'm going to put Kansas City 1, Pittsburgh 2, Baltimore 3. That's how I would see it there. Yeah, that would be my top 3.
Okay. Fun topics to come back to later as the season moves on.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.